As we all know, this year commemorates the 100th anniversary of the birth of Oliver Tambo, one of the South African greatest struggle heroes. And we are here to celebrate his life and memory, and also to welcome the group of the master students at the Center for Human Rights. We are very grateful to have Ntate Dikgang today to talk to the students and to talk about his own struggle icon. All the students have received a signed copy by Justice Musaneke. I know how much you went through to sign those books, and we're grateful to have you here today. Without further ado, would like to request Professor Andrew Bourine, our Dean of Faculty of Law. The Center for Human Rights is based in we are located in the law building, right underneath Professor Bourine's office, who's always like looking down on us when we do naughty things, and he supports our work at the Center for Human Rights, and we are grateful to have him. Professor Bourine.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you at this illustrious occasion. As you know, this, on the one hand, is the annual opening of our master programs run by the Center for Human Rights, but at the same time, this is a special event this year because it doubles up as the occasion where we will also present the second lecture in honor of the life of the late Oliver Tambo. So a very warm welcome to everyone on behalf of the Faculty of Law. In particular, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Justice Dikgang Moseneke, retired Deputy Chief Justice of South Africa, Mrs. Graça Machel, the founder of the Graça Machel Trust. Then from the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, we have the CEO, Mrs. Linda Vilakazi, and I will invite her to the stage in a moment, to the podium, and of course also the other representatives from the foundation. Then from our institution, the University of Pretoria, we have Professor Tinyiku Maluleke here with us. He's a special advisor to the Vice-Chancellor of the university, and of course Professor Frans Viljoen, the Director of the Center for Human Rights. We have a number of our very important donors here this afternoon. Ms. Sofia de Souza, Deputy Head of Mission of the European Union, the Ambassador of Norway, Ms. Trine Skymoen, Ms. Brechtje Wijsenbeek, Senior Political Officer of the Embassy of the Netherlands, representatives of DART and the Embassy of Germany, representatives of the delegation of Flanders. We have Ambassador Ismail Kubadia, retired ambassador. Mr. Shane Maja from the Gauteng Provincial Government. Ms. Pindile Balene, Director General of the Gauteng Office of the Premier. Ms. Maria Mbengashe, Program Manager of the United Nations, representatives of various NGOs, government departments, and political parties, and of course, our special VIP guests this afternoon, our master students, colleagues, and friends of the faculty. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you. Now, last year was also a very special year for the Center for Human Rights because the Center celebrated its 30th anniversary since the establishment of the Center for Human Rights way back in 1986. The Center for Human Rights is one of the flagships at our university and in our faculty, which is indeed an African center of excellence serving the needs of Africa. I once again want to congratulate the Center for Human Rights for what it has achieved over 3 decades, and we wish them well with their many initiatives for 2017. If we look at our students this year, the student intake at the Center for Human Rights, they represent 27 countries of which 25 African countries. So that is quite an achievement. For our masterclass students of 2017, your journey is already well underway. And I'm sure this year will be a liberating journey for you, for all of you. It will nevertheless, it will be a tough year, but please hang in there and make the most of this year. You will also benefit from learning about the lives of others, like the life and times of the late Mr. Oliver Tambo. And our master students also attended the first Oliver Tambo lecture this year, presented by Justice Albie Sachs. And we learned about the person, Oliver Tambo, a person that was known for infinite wisdom, passion, and the sense of social justice. So this discussion will continue this afternoon when Justice Moseneke will present, amongst others, the second lecture in this particular series. And Justice Moseneke, of course, is also an iconic figure in South Africa. As you know, he's a foremost South African lawyer, an esteemed former member of the judiciary, a human rights activist, and, of course, an extraordinary person. His life experience and wisdom has been captured in his book, which was launched recently, My Own Liberator. So, for our students, please draw from the lives of these great people, which will definitely serve as an inspiration to all of you. When you go home, ensure that you put your newly obtained knowledge to good use. As to the road ahead, remember, perseverance is the key to success. In the words of Jocelyn Soriano, I hope that you will persevere until the very end, because it is only then that you will grasp that the end is but the very beginning of the realization of your dreams. So I give this to all of our master students. But my brief actually for the welcoming was also just to do a brief introduction to one of my colleagues, Professor Tinyiku Maluleke, who will in turn do the welcoming on behalf of the university, and he will also introduce our keynote speaker. So, Professor Tinyiku Maluleke, if you can just rise, please, sir. Professor Tinyiku Maluleke is currently a member of the executive at the University of Pretoria, and he serves as a special advisor to the Vice-Chancellor. He's a theologian by training and a respected academic, thought leader, and well-known social and political commentator on South African, African, and global politics. He joined the University of Pretoria as professor in African spirituality and culture in the Faculty of Theology during November 2014, and he then also served as assistant to the Vice-Chancellor and principal in the advancement of the university's strategy for Africa. Professor Maluleke is proficient in most of the official South African languages, and he also speaks French. He has more than 20 years of experience as a leading researcher and has held numerous leadership positions in South African universities. He has supervised a significant number of PhD students, published over 80 peer-reviewed articles, and he has written dozens of popular articles on critical issues facing society today. He's a highly rated NRF researcher, and he is also a member of the South African Academy of Science. He took up his appointment at the University of Pretoria on 1 November 2014 after relinquishing his former position as Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg. So we're looking forward to your welcoming as well, sir. Before I leave the podium, please allow me to thank the Center for Human Rights, the Director, Professor Frans Viljoen, the Deputy Director, Mr. Norman Taku, and the whole team, Tuto Glalele, Yolanda Boysen, Carol Viljoen, Eric Langa, and many others who've put in hours of work to make this event happen this afternoon. At the same time, I also want to thank all the members of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation who partnered with us for the Oliver Tambo Lectures series. Thank you for your inputs as well. So I think for the team who have arranged everything, let's give them also a warm round of applause. I now call on Ms. Linda Vilakasi from the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation to say a few words. I thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll try and be brief so that we can get to the food and the beautiful students. I feel quite honored to have been entrusted with the role of leading the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. I think by just mentioning the name, you can all understand that it's quite a daunting and challenging task to have been given. And of course, that cannot be possible without the team that works with us. Of course, we've got a capable board of trustees, and I'm here today accompanied by our Deputy Chair, Babdu Mankosi, the former mayor of Ekurhuleni, who has been a trustee since the day the foundation was set up. And he makes the work much lighter. And there is a team of 3, and 2 of us are here, and I'm also with Natasha Ali, who helps with the office running around. The 3rd member is sitting back at the office answering your calls when you call and ask for logos and clips and images and what are we doing this year to honor this giant, and that is the foundation. It's quite important to think very briefly as to why this year is the University of Pretoria doing this way. Every year the university welcomes students. Everywhere the university hosts a number of events, but as Professor Borain said, this year it's very important. The library in the law faculty is named after Oliver Reginald Tambo. It's been like that for many years, and we felt it befitting that this year, as we celebrate this gentle giant, as a foundation, we're too small to do that task. So what we've decided to do is to open up the space and allow as many South Africans, as many institutions, to pick up the challenge and do something in honoring him. We believe that's the best way to honor a man like that. You cannot hold him in a bottle and close him and claim he's yours. He liberated himself. He left the country and spent 30 years working internationally to help us be where we are today. And therefore, we want to applaud the University of Pretoria for taking that baton and moving on with it. That is the correct way to honor a giant and a son of the soil like Oliver Reginald Tambo. The foundation, in a nutshell, is being tasked with ensuring that we preserve and promote his legacy. Of course, we do it for both Oliver Tambo and Adelaide Tambo, but today I'll speak more about Oliver because it's his year. On the 27th of October this year, we will be celebrating what would have been his 100th birthday had he lived. And some of you would therefore find the answers, hopefully, in the presentations today as to why him in particular. So many people have crossed that mark in their lives, even post their being here with us. But for this giant, we need to stop and take a moment and celebrate him because of the amazing life he led. And that's why we all look forward to Ntate Moseneke's contribution on how much we can learn from that gentle giant. And thank you, Ntate Moseneke, for honoring the invitation. So the foundation has decided that whatever we do, it has to move towards the point of improving lives for all South Africans and beyond. So any program that we pick, any initiative that we take, we always ask ourselves, will it improve lives? And as such, our work cuts across doing work with women, with young people in education, and continuing to promote his values. Now, values are very difficult to promote, and one of the approaches we've taken is to say, let us learn from the script of his life. The back of your program does refer to some of his values, but it's what those values mean for us today and how we manage to live them, to continue to advance society and improve our lives and those of others. So it's one thing to keep on hammering that he was a selfless leader, he was a humble man. Are we being humble in the way we do our work? Are we selfless in the manner that we share what we know and what we do? And that's the challenge we also wish to give to the students who are taking this amazing program this year and say, whatever you're going to benefit from this year, please think hard around how you use that and emulate some of Tambo's values in making sure that whatever you do, you continue to live out that legacy. But live it in your own way, as long as it's a positive impact on other people's lives. I think that's all we ask for. Of course, we will also continue to hold dialogues and seminars, and this debate is but one example of that. So at this point, we continue to say to everybody across South Africa, please carry on, celebrate this giant. Talk to us where you need our support or ideas, or even come to us with exciting initiatives that we're doing so that his legacy continues to live way beyond that. And in conclusion, I really want to say congratulations to the students. You come from a continent that gave OR a home, that actually almost compromised their own safety. If I could just single one and think of Zambia and Lusaka. In that country, Tambo was taken almost as a state president. He was accorded the status of a state president, and it is through the support of the Zambians, and in particular, former President KK, that he was able to fight the difficult fight that he fought. And of course, it wasn't only Lusaka. It was many, many other countries, but I just thought it's important that as you embark on this journey and enjoy this year, that you remember that you're walking in the footsteps of a giant. And congratulations, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Ms. Vilakazi, and for giving us the opportunity to host the Oliver Tambo lectures. And thank you also, Prof. Borain, for having introduced Professor Maluleke. As some of you might know, the Center for Human Rights is both an academic institution and an NGO. Many of our projects are funded by donors, and one of the projects that is heavily funded by our donors is the Master's Program. And today we have representatives of the Kingdom of Norway who has consistently been one of our donors for the Master's Program. And I would like to welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Trine Skimoen, who is the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Norway, to address you a few words on behalf of the donors. However, before she comes, I would like to inform you that due to other prior commitments, she will have to leave us soon after her speech. She actually has to go to the opening of an art exhibition on international justice at the Constitutional Hill. Can we please have Her Excellency? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And dear all, I think I will not say any names, risk of forgetting some, and spend all the time to introduce all the dignitaries here. Let's say we're all dignitaries, and I think we're going to have a good time this afternoon. So very good afternoon to all of you. As Norwegian ambassador, I have been given the honor of saying a few words today, as was mentioned, on behalf of the many partners and friends of the Center for Human Rights. And I thought I should start by saying something about why Norway and all the other partners are such loyal supporters of the center. I thought I would, but then I found it surprisingly hard. Not because I can't think of anything to say, quite the opposite. It's because it's too much that I feel that I should mention to do the center and its staff proper justice, because the center is really, really doing very important and good work. So for years, the CHR has been a leading light of human rights, not only here in South Africa, but all over the African continent and beyond. Your work on human rights education, on improving the rights of women, sexual minorities, people living with HIV, indigenous people, disadvantaged and marginalized groups in Africa, that is nothing short of impressive. And we as partners, we the partners are not alone in thinking so, because both the UNESCO Prize for Human Rights Education and the AU Human Rights Prize are testaments to your achievements. And tonight, we are also here to honor another African leading light, O.R. Tambo. O.R. Tambo dedicated his life to restoring the freedom and the dignity of Black South Africans after centuries of colonialism and apartheid. The leadership and moral character he demonstrated through the darkest days of racial oppression in this country is an example most of us can only aspire to emulate. And as we have heard, his foundation is carrying his values forward. And I think it's fitting that the one who will deliver the second Oliver Tambo Centenary Lecture is another freedom fighter, one who lost 10 years of his life to Robben Island, one who has contributed so much to building the new South Africa as an incredibly respected Deputy Chief Justice, a true beacon of excellence. Justice Moseneke, I am grateful to be allowed to be on the stage here now that you will be on a little bit later. But not least, I would like to honor you, the students. You, the selected ones from all over Africa who have been admitted to the CHR's highly regarded master's program. You have decided to use your talents not for self-enrichment or status seeking. You have decided to use your talents to further the cause of human rights throughout Africa and the world. And you are following in the footsteps of alumni who are achieving great things on this continent and elsewhere. You will find alumni among High Court judges, government ministers, those who have top positions in the AU, parliamentarians, to name a few. But you will also find alumni doing important human rights work on the ground. Take, for instance, Hadiza Mahaman. She is helping to dig water wells for rural women in Niger and providing them with small machines to grind maize and millet. This means that the women do not have to walk miles to fetch water or spend hours grinding grain in a wooden mortar to feed their families. This is human rights work where it counts most on the ground. And I was also moved by the story of Ugandan alumni Julius Osega, who participated in the AU peacekeeping mission to Darfur to protect the civilian population there. He lost his life, making the ultimate sacrifice in the name of peace and human rights. In general, be inspired by the example of those who had gone before you, but make your own mark on the world. The time ahead will be filled with hard work, I hope, I trust. You will work hard. Interesting and challenging conversations, new friendships, and new perspectives. It will change you, but you will also remain the same. I have great faith in you, because no matter how corny it sounds, you are the future. And I envy you for that, and I wish you the best of luck.
even now, and tell you that our Zambian alumni include some very good and great people, and the most prominent of whom is the Attorney General of Zambia. So you have a great challenge when you go back to be something greater than the Attorney General. Welcome and good luck for the year ahead. And finally, we have 3 students from Zimbabwe. So like Nigeria, we all feel Zimbabwean because we have such great solidarity with the people of this great nation. It is impossible to exaggerate, I think, the challenges that this country has been confronted with politically, economically, socially, and in many other ways. Yet, once again, on our continent, we see people who cherish peace over armed conflict. We see voices, loud and gentle, which refuse to be silent. And we observe the promise of tomorrow that is built on the great pains of yesterday and today. Our most famous alumnus from Zimbabwe is a survivor of assassination attempts by the secret police. He maybe symbolizes the kind of courage in the face of fire that is common, I think, to all our students and alumni who are prepared to take on some of the most difficult questions and who are not afraid, as we heard from the Norwegian ambassador earlier, to pay even the highest price. We always remind our students and alumni, however, that please be brave but be careful. And some of our alumni work, a lot of them from Zimbabwe work in UN agencies, including the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and a Deputy Resident Representative of the United Nations. So welcome, welcome here, and good luck for the year ahead. My computer is at 3%, and I am finished. So welcome to all our students. Good luck for the year ahead, and see you on the other side.
Man, it's always so difficult to say something after Norman. Thank you, Norman. Norman is a great human being. He's a mentor to most of young people at the Center for Human Rights, and he always has time for us. So thank you, Norman, for that lovely welcome. So I have a ball here. Most of you might be wondering what I'm doing with the ball. So I've been asked Ntate Mosaneke to sign the ball. I've harassed him over and over again to sign over 80 books. So this is me asking him in front of you to sign the ball. So I have the privilege, or I had the time to read his book over the December holidays. And I hope all the people who buy his book or who got the signed books would actually read the book. He actually drafted the constitution of the Football Association at the first football association at Robben Island. And I know that soccer means so much to him. So this is a ball that was given to me by our Soji unit. I don't know what they're going to do with the ball, but they asked me to get the ball signed. So I think you can say no because I have all of you here. So you sign the ball. So, you know that before Mangantlo, our amohela, you are never welcome in the house. So, ke tlotla ke kopane te maluleka hore a tlotla our amohela lapeng mona ntate hore ha mane o tlotla bua le rona. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Are you still alive? Sanbonani. Ndimadekwana. Bonsoir. My job is quite straightforward. And before I say a few words of welcome, let me just acknowledge, although Professor Burain has already done that, so I'm not going to go through the list again. Some of the VIPs in our presence. The Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, Professor Cheryl de la Rey, would have loved to be here in person today, but she is unable to be with us because of other commitments. And I'm sorry that you have me as a substitute for her. But nothing gives me more pleasure than to welcome in our midst Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who is going to speak shortly after me, and also to welcome Mama Gracia Machel. Thank you very much for honoring us and being with us tonight. I also want to mention in particular Melinda Vilakazi, the CEO of the OR Tambo Foundation, who has already been on stage. Babunkosi and others who belong to the foundation. The University of Pretoria is extremely proud and honored to be associated with the OR Tambo Foundation. We are especially pleased that our Faculty of Law was able to flesh out this collaboration, to have a series of lectures in collaboration with yourselves to celebrate the 100 years or the centenary of one of the giants of our struggle, Oliver Reginald Tambo. The University of Pretoria is transforming. And if you don't believe me, you saw all the students that were standing up from all over the continent. It is one of the best kept secrets that the University of Pretoria has the largest contingents of students from other parts of Africa than any other university in this country. And that the University of Pretoria has more than 50% of its student body being Africans. And I know that some South Africans don't realize that they are African. That is their problem. But actually, more than 50% of our student body is African. More than 50% of our students are women. It's another huge transformation that has occurred in our student body. So I'm very pleased today to welcome all of you, and especially to welcome the students. And thanks, Professor Taku, for the elegant manner in which you introduced them country by country, almost one by one. Thank you very much for doing that. These students are a picture of what the University of Pretoria is becoming and has become. I want to also acknowledge our donors. They've already been mentioned. The university is very appreciative of your input and your contribution to the education of our students. Members of the diplomatic corps, I will not mention each and every country that is here. I've been given a long list, but I can't wait to listen to former Deputy Chief Justice Ntate Dikgang Moseneke. So I'm not going to take too much time reading out the list that I have in front of me. Before I read a very short, abridged CV of Justice Moseneke, I just want to make two remarks. A few weeks ago, one of my hobbies is to write from time to time a column and popular articles for Mail and Guardian, Sunday Independent, and other newspapers. A few weeks ago, I wrote a piece when the Nelson Mandela Foundation was remembering 27 years since Nelson Mandela was released. And in that piece, I referred to a dream that Mandela speaks about in his own biography. And it is a dream which he said haunted him, especially in the 70s. And so he writes in one of his letters that there's this dream that recurs. And it is a dream of the day of my release from prison. And so in that dream, he comes out of prison in some other prison, different from the one he was in, somewhere near Johannesburg. And when he comes out, there's no one to meet him. And when he walks into Johannesburg, there is absolutely no one in the city. And he proceeds to go to Orlando. And he finds that the house is completely deserted. And this dream really troubled him. And I was thinking, and as you may see in that piece that I wrote, what does this mean? And I thought, but you know, it means all this time he never thought he would not come out of prison. Only the detail of how he will come out and who will meet him was in that dream, not the doubt that he would come out of prison. He was dreaming about this. When his picture was burned, when everything was not allowed about him, he was sleeping and dreaming about the day that he will go out of prison. And so when we think of Oliver Tambo and him and people like yourselves, these are people who had this dream that never abandoned them, or that they never abandoned, the dream of freedom. And so Luli Kalinikos, the biographer of Oliver Tambo, also talks about a dream that Oliver Tambo recorded. And this is a dream that visited him also. And in that dream, Oliver Tambo dreams about a messenger coming from Pretoria to Lusaka or wherever he was. And this messenger has a message, and the message is, let's talk. Let's begin negotiations. But in his dream, by the time the messenger arrives, the message is so encrypted, it's not clear what they want. And he worries. He worries about whether he will receive the message and he will be able to understand the message, and that message will then lead to negotiations that would free the country. Now you see, this ability to keep a dream about something that looks impossible, because to dream about negotiations in 1980 or 1985, it was an impossible dream. But he kept dreaming about a message coming from Pretoria saying, let's talk. Just like Mandela kept dreaming about that day that he will come out of prison. And so, Justice Museneke is one of those dreamers who kept the dream alive, that what looked impossible can be possible. And it is my absolute pleasure to quickly read a very brief CV of his. His full CV is as long as the longest judgment he has ever made. So I'll read a very brief one. Justice Dikgang Museneke was born in Pretoria on the 20th of December, 1947. He is the eldest son of the 4 children of Karabo Mabel, and a school headmaster, Samuel John Sidise Musineke. At 15, when in Standard 8, grade 10, Musineke was arrested and convicted of participating in anti-apartheid activity. He was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, which he served on Robben Island. While Musineke was on Robben Island, he studied for his matriculation and successfully completed his tertiary education. He obtained a BA in English and Political Science, as well as a B. Juris degree, and later completed an LLB, all at UNISA. Musineke started his professional career as an attorney's clerk at Clark Brands Incorporation in Pretoria, or incorporated in Pretoria, in 1976. In 1978, he was admitted as an attorney and practiced for 5 years as a partner of the law firm Maluleke, Siriti, and Musineke. In 1983, he began practice as an advocate in Johannesburg and Pretoria, and in 1993, he was elevated to senior counsel. Musineke was appointed visiting fellow and lecturer at Columbia Law School, University of Columbia, New York in 1986. In 1993, Musineke served on the technical committee that drafted the interim constitution of 1993. In 1994, he was appointed deputy chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, which conducted the first democratic elections in South Africa. September 1994, while practicing as a silk, Musineke accepted an acting appointment to the Transvaal Provincial Division of the Supreme Court. In November 2001, he was appointed a judge of the High Court in Pretoria. On the 29th November 2002, he was appointed as a judge in the Constitutional Court by President Thabo Mbeki. In June 2005, Musineke was appointed Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa. In 2006, he succeeded Justice Richard Goldstone as Chancellor of the University of Wits. He is a founder member of the Black Lawyers Association and of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers of South Africa. In the past 20 years, Justice Musineke has read numerous papers at law and business conferences. He has published several academic papers in law journals at home and abroad. What an honor it is for the University of Pretoria to welcome Justice Musineke. Thank you very much.
Nkensila osi Maluleke. Kensengof. A beautiful African language. I'm really saying thank you. Thank you ever so much. I've prepared a text. Just the discipline of being a judge. You write what you think. And you hope posterity might want to read it, Norman. So you just get into that habit of doing so. And you're going to have to bear with me. It's 11 pages, so that's 20 minutes, right? At 2 minutes a page. I'm going to run through it because I think it's just the right thing to do, particularly if you talk about arguably one of the greatest revolutionaries that the African continent has produced. So, in due respect to that task, I'm going to do exactly that. It'd be more fun, I think, to go ad lib like a jazz artist, but I'm not going to do that. I think I'm going to show that discipline. Let me start off by acknowledging the Tambo family, because indeed the foundation relates to both Comrade Oliver Tambo and Comrade Adelaide Tambo. So I'd like to start there and just thank you ever so much. Your Excellencies who are here present, Mama, Gracia, Michelle, indeed, our First Lady, not so long ago, and just wonderful to see you amongst us, particularly amongst these very young people. Also, Professor Tinyiko Maluleke and other leadership of this university. Prof. Franz Viljoen is that kind of great leader who sits in the background. You almost would not know who's the director of. I sometimes think it's Norman Taku, the director. Until I look at your documentation to know you actually are his boss. But it doesn't always come through, but I'd like to acknowledge you. And indeed, our participants and students, the LLM programs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of the foundation and the former mayor of Kiruleni, I both would like to also thank you for being here and taking the time for Utata. I owe my presence here today to the kind invitation of the Center for Human Rights, located here in this very University of Pretoria, who, as we all know by now, are hosting a master's program welcoming ceremony. The record will show that this is not the first time, Norman, that I've had the privilege to address a similar welcoming party. I hope it will not be the last time, or to be part of the national, continental, and global moot court programs of the Center. So for that, I am truly grateful. We must continue to nurture waves and waves of fresh and inspired leaders from our continent. We must continue to say to our young, freedom is the lifeblood of a full life. Nobody can thrive in captivity. Hard work matters. Personal and collective agency are dependable combinations to fulfill personal and collective aspirations. We must continue to teach our young leaders that honesty matters, and that the full and dignified lives occur only within the salutary framework of fundamental rights and freedoms. The Center is also hosting the Centenary Lecture to celebrate the many dimensions of the life of Oliver Reginald Tambo. I'm grateful to the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, who asked me to deliver the second Oliver Tambo Centenary Lecture. I gladly accepted the invitation because it is indeed a rare honor. It is a cherished privilege for the one prime reason: I'm going to become the praise singer of a great, great leader. And having lived and grown up as a child of our revolution, Oliver Reginald Tambo is nearly matchless in my estimation. He stands out as one of the leading revolutionaries of his time, and indeed of our time. For 3 decades, from 1960 to 1990, he provided servant, ethical, and indeed astute leadership to the African National Congress. O.R. Tambo, more than anyone else, set the foundation for a resilient liberation movement in exile and became the source of inspiration to the domestic uprising of the 1980s, prosecuted in the main by the mass democratic movement. And to this subject, I will return later. Now, I've chosen to welcome participants in the master's program, the Center for Human Rights, by looking at the compelling adaptation or shift political and other leaders on the African continent, and more poignantly, the grassroots people of Africa have to make in order to reverse the ravages of colonial experience and to reassert the humanity of Africa and the right to adequate lives. Now, this is, of course, an obvious statement, and here it is. Fundamental human rights and freedoms matter. Fundamental rights and freedoms are not a post-colonial, neo-Western liberal fetish which deserves opposition and resistance by African scholars and public intellectuals. Let me just remind you, the early leaders of the mass resistant movements against colonial rule on the African continent quickly formed the OAU and adopted a raft of charters and fundamental rights and freedoms. Of course, these were remarkable leaders in many ways, and Norman Taku referred to a number of them. And that raft of great Africanist stalwarts included Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Ahmed Ben Bella, the first president of Algeria, Felix Houphouët-Boigny, the first president of Cote d'Ivoire, Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya, Julius Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania, Abdel Nasser, president of Egypt, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the first prime minister of Nigeria, Patrice Lumumba, the first president of the Belgian Congo, so they called it then, Seretse Khama, the first president of Botswana, Kamuzu Banda, about whom you've heard earlier, of Malawi, indeed Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, Milton Obote, the first prime minister of Uganda, Ahmed Sukutori, first president of Guinea, and indeed I could go on and on and on. With the advent of OAU, immediately basic covenants and charters were endorsed and indeed refined. It is appropriate to observe that during his stay in 3 decades of exile, O.R. Tambo interacted with these leaders who supported our struggle. So these were very much in his class of the 1960s leaders. Now, taking a cue from this rich tradition in South Africa too, ultimately our freedom came and we adopted a very inspired constitution that drew freely from fundamental rights and freedoms and charters that the continent had generated by that time and customized into the African setting. And I pause for a moment to talk very briefly about our own constitution, because it came up after the longest struggle for freedom on the continent. Our constitutional democracy, like many on the continent, was forged on the anvil of division, of past injustice, of economic inequity, but also on the hope of reconciliation, of nation building and social cohesion. So, notionally, our constitution is premised on the will of the people, expressed in representative and participatory processes. It does not only establish its supremacy, rule of law and fundamental rights, but also recites our collective conditions. It sets out the minimum program that we all agree on. It contains our joint minimum ideological normative choices of what a good society should be. Our Constitution requires our state, all its organs of state, to take reasonable steps with undue delay to achieve a good society. And that virtual society envisioned has a significant social democratic flavor. Some reckon, and yet others take it to be something different else. Aside facile text, the Constitution provides for many progressive things. It protects and advances fair labor practices. It compels us to preserve the environment. It is not harmful for the benefit of the present and future generations. It envisions restitution of land and victims of dispossession, but does not permit arbitrary deprivation of property. It permits expropriation and redistribution of land for public good, provided it's against just compensation. So we've gone a long, long way in setting out those things that are closest to our hearts after a long struggle. For instance, in our Constitution, we promise everyone the right of access to an adequate house, to food, to health care, to water, to social security. We set out in many words that the child's best interests are paramount, importance in everything and concerning young people. And just as important, our Constitution had hoped that our leaders and the political elite would be responsive in their conduct, which should be open, and would provide accountable governance from all organs of state. It must follow from what I've just said, and I could say much, much more, that our constitutional design is emphatically transformative. It is meant to move us from a murky and British past to an inclusive future, animated by values of human decency and solidarity. It contains a binding consensus or a blueprint of what a fully transformed society should look like. Now, from a starry-eyed young revolutionary, which I was, who sought to turn the world upside down, to now, I've learned a few things which I want to share with you this evening. Now, first, I accept that I am older, and I seem to say things which are pretty obvious, but I say them because I think they are important. This, I am certain, is something O.R. Tambo would have cautioned and counseled us on, having lived and prosecuted a long struggle on the continent. Now, here is the first thing. Charters, covenants, and millennium goals and declarations are not freedom and are not guarantees. They are a compelling hope and a wish for a better life. And that's important, I repeat that. Charters, covenants, millennium goals, declarations are not freedoms and guarantees. They are a compelling hope and a wish for a better life. Brilliant constitutions don't in themselves convert to a more equal, caring society of equal worth and social justice. All of these wonderful documents, which the OAU and later the AU adopted, and which we also in our Constitution adopted, require women and men of resolve to convert wonderful and aspirational blueprints to reality. That seems trite and obvious, but it doesn't happen every day, and happens in a very few countries, particularly on the African continent. Second lesson, freedom once earned must be guarded jealously and meticulously. All institutions of state, of commerce, and society, we must always remember, particularly you young people, must be held to account. No power is free-willing power. All power must be used to advance public good and society. And therefore, I urge you to embrace the notion that every African country must induct a culture of accountability and of transparency, which leaders hate and often pay only lip service to. Listen to every political speech, you'll hear those words, and listen to the deeds, we don't see the transparency and accountability. A few examples may be relevant to young lawyers, and these should suffice. Does any one of you remember the SADC Tribunal? Or are you all too young to remember that? Mama Michelle does. Who else remembers the SADC Tribunal? Now, it was a court of law set up by SADC countries to oversee disputes between states, but also between states and their citizens, once they've exhausted domestic remedies. I attended, as Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, its formal opening in Windhoek, in the old Turenhale facility, which saw and ushered in the independence in Namibia. The tribunal brought out a seminal judgment on land confiscation in Zimbabwe without due process. President Mugabe became very angry. Our political leaders disbanded the court and never to function again. Not a word of objection was raised by the populaces of the SADC countries. Activist lawyers made a few diffident noises and very quickly relented. What does this tell us? Political elite are often irritated by courts and tribunals who seek to hold them to account as required by the law. What if the state sought to disband the Constitutional Court in South Africa? Just pause for a moment and think about that. What if the president was unhappy about one of our judgments and disbanded the court? And few presidents do that on the African continent. They do disband courts, and they have that power. The SADC tribunal went that way and never again to be seen. And we know that this was deleterious and a disaster. And indeed, as I say, there are many jurisdictions around our country have made courts, US-long lawyers should know that, actually ineffective, incapable of coming on the side of the vulnerable in society. Another ready example must surely be the decision of our executive to withdraw from the ICC International Criminal Court. It is so that the International Criminal Court is not flawless. It is not perfect. And one of the big reasons for this is that some of the biggest transgressors of international law, of the Rome Statute, have stayed out of it and refused to be bound by it, and continue to act with impunity all around the world. But that is no argument why we African countries should assume the stance that our citizens, who have in some parts have been exposed to widespread crimes against humanity, genocide, and torture, deserve less protection. We have been victims of vicious oppression. I had only this morning the story of Namibia and the skulls that were exported to Germany. Skulls of Namibians that were cleaned up like we clean up the skull of a sheep. But in there are thousands and thousands. So we have been there as African people. We know what oppression is. We know colonialism is repressive and has caused havoc in our lives. We should not require less protection for those who are vulnerable on the African continent. Of course, we could set up a continental court and give it the powers to protect our people. But we cannot get out of the ICC until we are certain that we would not be inviting impunity. Excuse me. In short, what I'm really saying to you as young lawyers, we should not opt for impunity or an absence of accountability, because that makes poorer people more vulnerable and more excluded and without the freedom and social equity that they deserve. Again, it had to be the courts in this country that pointed out the illegality that attached to the executive decision to withdraw without parliamentary sanction. Again, I would have hoped that the people on the ground would demand accountability from the ruling elite. it can't be courts all the time saying this is wrong. We've come to a time where the people are best placed to reject impunity, to point it out. And young lawyers like you are best positioned to induct that culture that will get us there. So, thank you so much. Your duty as you finish your LLM studies here at the center is to go back, not to London, not to New York, not to Amsterdam, not to Oslo, and not all of you become international civil servants, but to African capitals, to African villages, to start teaching and inducting a culture that banishes impunity, to do away with a culture that disregards the law. In theory, the law is a democratic product of the people and ought to be observed by all. We should vow to stop violations of human rights and freedoms. We should reject any attempts to raid the public purse. You as young people in your new world, you should be averse to nepotism, to patronage, and decidedly favor accountability, always remembering that the highest form of accountability in public affairs is electoral accountability. If you were to do so, you would bring a smile to Oliver Reginald Tambo, that great Africanist and internationalist. Who was he? Who are we talking about? There's nothing flat here. Everything is sliding. Thank you, Professor Borain. Thank you ever so much. Well, he was born 100 years ago. On the 25th of October, it will be exactly 100 years that O.R. lived in a small village called Bizana. Like most of us, born into poverty, but ends up opening the first black law firm in this country with none other than Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. And for a good part of his stay in exile, first becomes acting president of African National Congress and later president after Chief Luthuli had passed on. He returns to the country in 1990, and lo and behold, after that sacrifice, turns over the leadership to Nelson Mandela. And sadly so, on the 24th of April 1993, O.R. passes on. Now, his life is very well known and very well documented. He's of Pondo extraction, as I say, with very modest farming origins. He studies very hard and ends up in Fort Hare University. And at the time, the only university that admitted black citizens of this country, and indeed many other leaders from the continent, Dr. Eduardo Mondlane, Seretse Khama, President Mugabe, went to the same university. Now, Fort Hare might have been exciting, but in no time he joins the Youth League, which leads to the 1949 Program of Action, which really became the linchpin to move the African National Congress into a pole position to become a premier liberation movement. And this leads, of course, to the Defiance Campaign of 1952. And he thinks about the notion of being an Anglican priest, and he just passes that by and continues with the struggle more incessantly. Now, I'm not going to, if you want to read the full history of O.R. Tambo, I've documented it, and you are welcome to come and read it. I am more energized by the return of O.R. Tambo to South Africa. Such a giant in our struggle returns to teach us about grace, about warmth, about affection. He comes back to his native country, indeed to engage with F.W. de Klerk and his other minions with whom he had started talking about quite early. Because rightly so, he had taken the position that it was better to procure liberation in peaceful circumstances rather than to pursue an armed struggle nearly endlessly. In my own liberator, I record my first encounter with Ntate Oliver Tambo. You'll find it in the book there. I was a child then. And I write about the impact of the Mandela and Tambo law firm plug, which I saw at the entrance of Chancellor House on Commissioner Street in Johannesburg. I was too young not to be impressed by a significant first black law firm right within the city of Johannesburg. And my dad had gone there to seek legal support after the massive dispossession and forced removals at Lady Selborne. And that childhood experience afforded me the window to explore the complex intersection between law as a set of rules to regulate society and the true purpose of law, which is really and hopefully to advance the achievement of justice. In the book, I expose my admiration for the decision of Rolihlahla Mandela and O.R. Tambo to close the legal practice in favor of an expansive revolution to transform their world. As lawyers, they understood that rules had limitations. And in fact, at some point, you've got to make the transition to activism, which many of you're young, but you'll find that you do get to that point. When the rules are subverted and can't produce justice, it becomes quite a significant challenge. And many would make the transition, which O.R. Tambo did not think twice to make. And out of his life, as I draw to a close, selflessness, just pursuing a cause which had little or nothing for him personally. In a world of instant gratification, of personal aggrandizement, he takes 3 decades of his life to serve in a liberation movement. He returns home and does not demand to become the number one, which he could rightly have demanded. And he was quite happy to turn over the leadership to Rolihlahla Mandela. Now that is servant leadership at its purest and at its highest form. And out of his life, I draw relentlessness, coping with 30 years of thankless leadership. We know, it's a matter of historical record, the African National Congress ran into deep waters during the late 1960s whilst in exile. It was necessary to call Morogoro Conference, hosted by the Tanzanians in Tanzania, and this was in 1969. It was a vital moment in the life of a great movement. Under O.R. Tambo's leadership, the conference generated a strategy and tactic statement that remains the lodestar of the African National Congress up to this day. It is he, O.R. Tambo, who socialized the culture of a self-correcting liberation movement. He drew the ANC from the precipice and allowed it to have and to become a leading liberation movement. If he were to be alive, he may have, in these difficult times of this O.R. Tambo's great movement, called another Mogorogoro conference at this time and hour. He probably would have brought to bear calmness in the face of divisions. He would have called and drawn from his wisdom. He had a known gift of listening, and yet he followed and had ample tenacity of a revolutionary who knows where he is going. Because believe me, the revolutionaries too do lose their way from time to time. O.R. Tambo would have reminded us that morality in public life matters. He would have told us ethical leadership is indispensable because leaders, like the state, are great teachers. The unity of purpose, I mean of good purpose, matters. There's no point having unity to do wrong. You must have unity around achieving a good purpose. So unity to destruct is not what I'm talking about. And O.R. Tambo would have reminded us that. The urgent and good purpose of our time is to pursue and achieve the most pressing goals for an equal, an open, a non-racial, non-sexist, inclusive, and socially just society. And if he was alive, he would have insisted that we remind ourselves of this goal. O.R. Tambo would have said, it is not about power, it is about purpose. It is not about the political and economic elite. It is about what is in the utmost true and legitimate interest of our people as a whole. May God bless Africa. Good night. God bless.
And Ntate, thank you very much for that wonderful lecture on OR. What do you say after what Ntate has said? He's a selfless man who has done so much for this country and for the freedom that we enjoy today, and we should be grateful for him, to him, for as long as he lives. So we are going to take a question and answer, 5 questions for Ntate. We are running really late, so we're only going to take 5 questions. I hope and pray that in the next 30 years, we'll be celebrating Ntate life the way that we are celebrating OR's lives today, because I think he has done so much for the democracy and for South Africa, and we are where we are because of people like him today. One of the most humbling experiences that I have in my life is for him to say to me, "Tuto ngwanaka," when he's talking to me. He's one of those people who was really humble, and when you meet him, he's really, really incredible human being. And I really encourage those who haven't read his book to read it. It's on sale there at the corner for those who don't have a copy. please buy the book and read it, just to honor him the way that he has fought for our freedom. One of my earliest memories that I have of him was I was in Geneva doing the World Mood, and he does a lot of things for the Center for Human Rights. And he was sitting as one of the judges in the final round. And one of my tasks was to get accreditation for our judges. So I walked to the gate to get accreditation for the judges. So I give the security guard my list. She goes through my list like, oh, okay, the judge. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that he was that famous. I'm like, yeah, the judge, like, oh, he was here. Like, oh, okay, he was here. I was like, yeah. So did you give him his accreditation card? Like, no. I'm like, okay. Why didn't you give him his accreditation card? Like, he didn't have his passport. So I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that the Deputy Chief Justice of South Africa walked all the way to the UN offices to get his accreditation card and didn't give him his accreditation card? Like, yes. So what happened? I told him to go back and get his passport and he can get his accreditation card. So I ran back to try and call Ndati Dikgang to find out what happened, and I'm like apologizing profusely. You know what? I'll get your card. Please don't come. And then on the phone, I called him. He was so calm. I was like, no, Tito, don't worry about it. It is okay. You know, and I actually wanted to take that walk and just to get that feeling from someone who held that high office. He was the fourth person or the fifth in the Republic, protocol-wise. And for him to have been okay being turned away by a security guard at the UN office, that is how selfless he is, and that is how much of a human being he is. And I'm grateful for him to be here today. There's always been the advert on TV about him being advertised about the Chief Justice, and I remember like the line that I always took away from that advert was like, no, I've always been ready. And I honestly think that he could have actually done that position more than justice. And one thing that I always take away from him, and something that he said that his mother always says, like, no, the blessings of the Lord knows no limits. So open up for a question answer for 5 questions, but I'll actually take priority for the LLM students, and then I'll actually go to the other people. So, okay, David.
Okay, thank you so much. Although I'm not an LLM student, I've been reminded by Professor Tamale here, my good sister. But one thing that gives me credence is I'm from Zambia, where the struggle was being fought from. So I remember as a student, as an undergraduate student in the 1980s, a number of you were not born by then. I saw Oliver Tambo personally several times. I would run into him, including Mandela when he was released. He came to Zambia. The first country he visited when he left South Africa, under the able leadership of Kenneth Kaunda. And we had Yasser Arafat. The revolution was being fought from Lusaka. We had SWAPO. We gave support to Frelimo. We had Zimbabwe, Joshua Nkomo. They were launching from Zambia. So I want to find out something which His Lordship has articulated pretty well. Oliver Tambo was a selfless leader, and he did not make too much noise. He handed over power to Nelson Mandela, who I think only had a term, and handed over power to the younger generation, our good brother Thabo Mbeki. Why are we having a problem now with African leaders not handing over power? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Khang, are you going to take questions one by one, or should you take a round of questions and then you
Well,
answer
we
the
agreed
questions?
on 5,
Yes, Senator.
and we're not going past 5, Tutor.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, so maybe we should have them all, and it might be easier to deal with them that way.
Okay, David. I recognize a hand down there. Oh, 2, actually. And then there is 3, 1, 2, 3. So, oh, no. Oh, my God.
No, thank you very much. First of all, I want to register my request to the Deputy Chief Justice that I want to engage him later. But at the moment, I want to lament heavily on Prof. Dinyuko Maluleke. I want to speak on his hypocrisy. Currently, my name is Slow Surprise. I'm from the University of Pretoria. As a result of having Christmas fall last year, we are faced with the conundrum there. A large number of students have been sleeping in church since January. They don't have any residences. One has been admitted to a mental institution as a result of the system brutality. But Maluleke, as a political analyst and the advisor to the Vice Chancellor, hasn't said anything. And that is shocking me. From January till today, our campus has been militarized. There are bouncers there. There are kids calling our sisters. And also the Center for Human Rights is not saying anything. We faced mass exclusion. Students are massively excluded, and they were not subjected to due process of disciplinary hearing. The Center for Human Rights, hence, it has been twerking over celebrating centenary lecturers. It's not dealing with their own internal processes. I'm very disappointed that you, and you must be named and shamed for your hypocrisy with your Vice Chancellor. And coming to, I want to lay my question to the Deputy Chief Justice. In playing quite a pivotal role in drafting our constitution, what's your take on allowing the protection of it's Section 25 of the Constitution, which speak of allowing expropriation of land as property to be compensated? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. So the next question, David, please, yeah, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Nomaswa Zenkosi from the Pretoria News.
Sorry, Nomaswa, can you please stand up?
Nomaswa
Yeah, thank you.
Zenkosi from the Pretoria News. If you don't mind me asking, Justice, I'd just like to know what your thoughts are on the current political climate, particularly in this week regarding our President and the Finance Minister. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, but could you usually limit the questions to the lecture and the welcoming ceremony of the students moving forward from now? Thank you. David. Yeah, he's moving. Thank you. Please give it to the gentleman that was. Yeah. No. The next
one. Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Simo Zulu. Mr. Judge Moseneke, I would like to pose the question on the issue of democratization in Africa in the context that, as we remember, Oliver Tambo. Towards the end of last year, 2016, 2 African countries had their elections, namely Ghana and the Gambia. Whereas in Ghana, President John Mahama conceded defeat, and which allowed the peaceful transfer of power. But in the Gambia, the president there initially rejected the election and outcomes. But we know developments later that he actually did leave office. Now, the question that I would like to ask from you with this background, do you think that actions by the President Yahya Jammeh, or the former President Yahya Jammeh of the Gambia, signify or communicates a message of the reversal of gains that the continent had scored in terms of its democratic project, wherein African peoples and African countries own and accept democratic processes, including the peaceful transfer of power? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
David, I think we've reached the number of questions. Please move the mic to Justice Moseneke to answer this round of questions, please. Dr. Moseneke, are you going to answer it from there or from here?
If I get a mic, yeah.
Oh, Kennedy.
Hi, thank you for the questions. We have a deal, 5 questions and done, right?
I understand.
So I'm going to do exactly that. Let's start off with the first question. Why do African leaders not hand over power? Frankly, the answer is, I don't know. Is it something I like, I hate? You see, and that is why I've made so much noise this evening about popular accountability. We cannot... Okay, let me start this way. The premise of democracy is insecurity of tenure. Let me start again. Democracy is premised on the notion that nobody has security of tenure. And the reason is that people ought to be given every 5 years, every 6 years, whatever it is, normally it's 5 years, to assess and to elect again. I had a meeting with a number of Scandinavian ambassadors the other day, and it was quite interesting to hear that almost all the countries, Benelux and Scandinavia, have coalition governments. And I asked them why, and they said, we decided a long time ago, nobody should have outright majority. And in that way, they can negotiate how best to maintain the principles that regulate that particular nation. And in Ghana, we've begun to see that same kind of thing where the Ghanaians go and look at the hard-nosed numbers, and had the privilege of going to the president's induction not so long ago. They actually shift, and the shift tends to be marginal, around presidents winning at 51%, 52%. So it's something that Africans, I think, my brother from Zambia, will have to learn over time, that our fate is in our hands. And that if a leader can't give us new ideas in 10 years, how on earth could they in 30 years? And how could there be renewal in any country? And Africans have become numb to the arrangement. And many Africans sort of swallow it. And that's why I was talking to these young people who are leaders of the future to say, we don't have to swallow that. We don't have to accept it. And you're going to need a few gutsy people who will say, but this is wrong. And I'm sure the center teaches that over and over again. So democracy is meant to allow for renewal, to allow for electoral accountability, to allow for good governance and leaders who as good as a country can give. So that is our duty, and I think we should continue to insist. The founding fathers I've talked about earlier, almost all of them made the same fault. They stayed in office almost forever. So their initial promises written down did not get us there. And that was my real thesis and theme for today. Well, the next question is about Section 25 of our Constitution. I know what you want to ask, and I've answered this many times at many meetings of young people. Of course, Section 25 is a compromise. If we did not have to negotiate with anybody, We may have written it differently, but I've said in many fora in this country that if we go to the actual text of the provision and we sweat it and make it work, we'll be much closer to land equity, much closer to reversing the injustice, land injustice in our country. So we have to go and do a lot of work. And if it is to be changed, we all know what's to be done. You need a 2/3 majority to be able to change it. So it's not a question of sloganeering. Have we done enough around the land justice? The answer is no. I think many people recognize that. We have to do more than we have done. In fact, you can hear in the ruling party says so. We have to do more to make sure that many of our people who are so-called unlawful occupiers actually have a place that they can call home. And that's a big homework we have, certainly for your generation, who are so thoughtful about it. Does the Constitution say that land must be expropriated with compensation? Yes, it does. But it must be just and equitable compensation. And ultimately, the courts will determine that, not market price. In some instances, the compensation may be very, very low. It doesn't follow that everything has to be done at market price. But that's what the Constitution says. Well, from Pretoria News, do I have any political thoughts about the current political developments? Answer is no. I don't have any thoughts. I'm a retired judge and I have no political thoughts. For Simo Zulu, thank you for the question. I like talking about agency a lot, and your examples of Ghana and Gambia are very telling and very apt, very, very on target. Indeed, in Gambia, the president said, I'm going nowhere. But in the DRC, the president also extended his term, and the court said it was fine. We're going to continue, and we as African people must understand this. We're going to continue to see attempts by the political elite to extend their stay in power. There are many things that we have to change by way of culture. Let me give you an example. In our arrangements, we have inverted the prism. All of the benefits we tend to give to the political leaders and political elite. You go to many other countries. I went to teach in Zurich, and I'm not going to be long about this, law school, and we're doing comparative constitutional law, talking about the executive and head of state. The professor from that university asked the LLM students like you, who is the president of Switzerland? And I can test you now. If you know, stand up and tell me, who's the president of Switzerland? Switzerland? Okay. And then, who? Yes, I know. I'm going to get your 7 presidents.
But she's from Switzerland.
Yeah, sure. She's from Switzerland, and she knows that they have no one president. Now, in Africa, the one president becomes everything. His head children also become everything. So what we have done in Africa, we've inverted the prism, we've taken political power and eulogized it and created a cult around leaders. And we give them blue lamps, we give them ambulances, we give them, name it, scooters and motorbikes. These young people in Switzerland did not know because they have 7 people in an executive arrangement. Each one of them holds office for 1 year, and they're on a constant rotation. So you have no time to give a kickback of a tender to your cousin, because you're in there for 1, but also the power is shared amongst the 7 of them. So we as Africans, and you guys who are young lawyers training, have to open your eyes and good look around the world. Do we want imperial presidents with all the insignia and all the blue lights and the airport stops when the president's plane flies and nobody can move around? Or do we want to tone down and remind presidents that they are public servants? And in that way, you're going to find that it's a culture that is quite different that focuses on social justice outcomes rather than on political hegemony. So it is sad to see the Gambian president saying, I'm staying, and it's wonderful to see that Ghanaians have become a genuine democracy, and they switch his party. They vote for this side, and then 5 years, they look at the numbers, the GDP, they look at economic growth, they look at employment, rates and numbers, they look at the vital figures, outputs at universities, and then they say, President Mahamba, it was nice to have you here, but thank you and goodbye. And he loses by 49%. And that focuses the mind for all political leaders. So we should continue to look for peace in our continent. We should continue to emphasize our Africanity and the fact that we have unique African problems and we should try and solve them. And I'm afraid nobody else can solve them for us but us. So we have a big culture change that we need, and I hope we get to it. I think I've covered the questions, and thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the closing of the lecture and the welcome ceremony. I would like to invite Ms. Natasha Ali from the Oliver Tambo Foundation to hand over a gift from us to Ndate Dikgang before we invite our director, Professor Franz Viljoen, to say the final word of welcome before dinner is served. Ndate Dikgang.
Thank you very much. I think another word of welcome is not quite what we should have. I should just be inviting you to dinner. But while I'm here, let me just say a few thank yous. First of all, to Justice Moseneke, thank you very much for being here. I think what we are also doing as South Africans, in a sense, by celebrating these 100 years, is to acknowledge those that have come before us, and to, in a sense, celebrate national human heritage, because without that awareness, that consciousness, we are not what we are. And I think tonight, in dealing with the Constitution, broad range of topics, but also infusing over that the life of Oliver Tambo, it was as if you, Justice Moseneke, I think, looked at his life and your words became like a breath that lightened up the embers of his life, the life that is not dead, a life that shines up every now and again. We thank you for shedding this light, for allowing this life to shed up, to lighten up in our presence. And using that maybe as a metaphor, we thought it also as a center, as a faculty, to wise to give you something that will steer you maybe in your life now, maybe that there's some relaxed moments. We have a present here, an anthology of places of the world that you may want to see or visit, and something that could accompany you on the route as you go there, maybe a sip here and there. So again, we ask you to come to the front and take a second round of gifts in appreciation for your contribution from Tutu here. To the students, I think, thank you. As the airlines say, thank you for having chosen us. We hope that we'll take you safely to your destination, but not only safely, but also well-fed, perhaps tonight. but also intellectually and in terms of your life's ambitions, in terms of your perspectives. We hope that you would have been undergoing some kind of shift, movement from one place to another in the year that you spend with us. That is our wish, sincerely so. I think perhaps if I were you, I'd be having mixed feelings. Because on the one hand, you heard how privileged you are, how selected you are fated here, you are our guests of honor. But on the other hand, you've heard that there are many long days and long evenings ahead. As you already know, there's much hard work, there's perspiration. To this, I would add that perhaps you are also having the apprehension that why you were selected, why you perhaps got a scholarship, has to do with the past, what you've done in the past. The challenge is now the present and the future that should guide you, your future aspirations, your role that you want to carve out for yourself. We hope that somehow we will assist you in steering yourself between these two, in a way, contending imperatives, and that you will be able to remain confident and have the knowledge and the skills, but at the same time be having some sense of humility and an awareness of your place relative to those of others. So again, welcome, thank you. We are the ones that celebrate you. I want to just say to the students on the 4 different programs, perhaps we emphasized a bit in terms of the alumni, the graduates, the Human Rights and Democratization in Africa program. Let me just assure you the other 3 programs that we are working hard on establishing graduate associations that are very functional and effective also for the other programs. And we hope that you will also be very much part of those alumni associations so that when we are taking stock, we will be properly taking stock of all the alumni from all the various different programs. That is really our ambition in the center into the future. Let me then also thank the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Ms. Vilakazi. Thank you very much. You are the ones that have taken the initiative. You are the ones that have approached us and initiated, including us. We really appreciate it, and we find it a very valuable exercise to have traveled on this road together with you as a faculty and as a center. As for the university, Professor Maluleke and Professor Burain, thank you. You provide the ground in which we are growing, and you give us, I suppose, enough compost to make us grow healthily. And we thank you for that and for your support, in particular then the university to the faculty and the faculty to the center. Without these, we would not have been able to do any of the things we try to do. All the other guests, we thank you. And I think we, in our absence, like to thank and acknowledge the presence here of Ma Grasa Machel. I think that perhaps, I'm not sure about protocol, presidents retain their titles, right? So they remain president. And I think first ladies, at least in this case, she is our first lady for life, that is very sure. So we acknowledge her also here as first lady, and we were privileged that she could attend with us. Everyone else who were able to spend their time with us here tonight, thank you very much. The donors were mentioned, had been mentioned. Let me just add my voice to that and explain also that you may have great ideas, but these ideas cost money and require partnership. So those donors who are present, those I think that have contributed, we gladly acknowledge. I refer you to our program. The names of our donors are on the program. It is in the first place the European Union, DART, the German government, the Norwegian embassy, the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the embassy, and the government of Flanders, Open Society Foundations, and we should add to this list APSA, which has been giving scholarships to the trade program in particular, and the South African National Research Foundation. Through its chair that Professor Bradlow occupies, it has given scholarships to students as well. The Masters in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa in particular is quite costly in the sense that there are very special elements. For those of you who are not familiar with the program, among others, the students spend the first semester 7 months with us in Pretoria, but they then spend another 5 or so months with one of our partner institutions or faculties across the continent. This covers In the east, Mauritius, in the west, Senegal, and in the south from Cape Town, to the north, not quite Cairo, but Alexandria, which is even further north. So we treasure and we also exist as a program because we have this partnership. And in that regard, I would also just like to acknowledge the presence here of Professor Sylvia Tamale, who happens to just be here as a teacher, but she is also a board member of the center, a long-standing friend, and we also associated with one of our partner faculties, Makerere University in Uganda. Thank you very much for being with us. We really treasure our relationship with you. Let me then finally turn to the center and say that anything that we do as a center is really something that is done as a team. And I think we try to harness the different potentials and talents, as we saw in the case of Norman and in the case of the lovely program directors, not lovely in a gender-based sense, but I think in terms of how competent they were, how inclusive they made us feel, how competent they were in the execution of their function. I think that added a luster to our presence here. I want to ask the following people again to stand. These are the people that from the center side hold these 4 programs together in the, for the Human Rights and Democratization in Africa. There is Norman. You've met Norman. There's Magnus, who is the academic director or program director for that particular program. There is Ashwani, who is the program. She's, I think, gone to, no, there she's back in the room. And then also Eric Luanga, who is the one responsible for events like these and all the wonderful talents that he set to display, and also the tutors who are here. The tutors on the program, if you may also just stand. They are often graduates from previous years. So there you go, people involved in the program. Those are the people who really help us in the center to hold this together. Thank you very much. For the trade investment law in Africa, we have Professor Danny Bradlow. Thank you very much, Danny. I think you'll miss the Gau train, but thank you for staying with us. With him is Olufemi Soyeyu. Olufemi, where are you? I think you are there. Thank you very much. And the tutors who are with you, Jacob and others, if you would also stand. Thank you very much. Then the Sexual and Reproductive Rights Program. As you may know, this program is done by online. So the students are not physically on the campus, but they come here for block week. So we organize this event in particular to coincide with their presences here. And we acknowledge in particular Professor Charles Ngwena, who I think is unfortunately not here, but has played a pivotal role together, once again, with Tuto, who holds that together administratively for the sexual and reproductive rights. And lastly, but certainly not least, is the multidisciplinary human rights program that is held together by Professor Ansungule. Unfortunately, he is in Zambia and not here due to a funeral that he had to attend, and then also Rutendo, who is assisting us as the academic coordinator in that program. Thank you very much. So I think these are enough introductions, enough welcomes, thank yous. We really appreciate your presence here. We look forward to working with these students, not only in this year, 2017, but beyond that. We wish you all the best. We thank you once again, everyone, for coming and joining us. In particular, also the alumna who presented the words of welcome and encouragement to the students. And we hope that you'll enjoy the evening further with us. Please, I take pleasure in inviting you eventually to have a lunch, or rather dinner. It is by now certainly dinner with us here, and stay with us and discuss and enjoy the evening further. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 serving points, and please be seated, you be guided to the serving point. And afterwards, there's alcohol there at the corner, and there'll be music, so let's eat, drink, and be merry. Thank you.